Hello and welcome to my evaluation question 4 video, where I'll be talking about how my skills have developed throughout the course using media technologies. At the start of my AS project, my skills using Photoshop was very basic. I'd only used this software application a handful of times before at GCSE level and knew the basic functions like adding new layers, inserting images and text, and moving layers around. However, even at the start of this course I had forgotten most of these basic functions and felt like I was using a completely new software, as my knowledge wasn't great at the start. I needed assistance often throughout the course when using Photoshop, and also felt as if I was teaching myself sometimes, as I often played around with the tools available. However, during the preliminary task stage of creating the cover page of a student magazine, I learned how to manipulate images more effectively by using the hue saturation options to manipulate the brightness and colour. I learned to duplicate layers and swap them around on the layer menu, which brought text and images forwards and backwards on the page, which allowed me to follow certain conventions of a magazine. At the start of the course, I had no previous experience with Adobe InDesign, so this software application was pretty alien to me. I was quite confused when first using InDesign. I expected it to be similar to Photoshop, but it was difficult to get to grips with. I hadn't really had much previous experience with hardware technologies like the Canon DSLR camera, which is why most of my photography throughout the first year of the course was quite poor quality, which I believe had a negative impact on the overall final product at the end of the year. When taking my photography, I didn't take into account the focus, depth of field or framing, which is why some of the images looked unprofessional. I had never wrote my own blog before and had no experience in using blogging sites such as WordPress and Weebly, and I found them really difficult to use at first. After struggling to get to grips with WordPress, I decided to use Weebly to construct my AS blog. I had numerous problems with the website throughout the AS coursework process, such as not being able to insert certain documents and being able to organise posts, so my blog posts were ultimately unorganised and looked messy when scrolling down the page. By the end of the year, my skills with InDesign were fairly advanced. I learned how to split my page into separate columns, which allowed me to follow the typical convention of a magazine, for example the rule of thirds. This allowed me to organise my text and images on the page in a professional looking manner, similar to that of other popular magazines such as Q and Kerrang, which I attempted to pastiche for my AS magazine. These uses of columns also allowed me to continue any text from one column onto the next, which was useful during the creation of my double page spread, as it allowed my page to look more organised. As well as using columns, I also learned to use the frame tool, which allowed me to draw rectangles on the page to see how items would look before actually placing any text or images. This allowed me to examine how items would look so I could reorganise frames if they looked quite messy on the page. During the creation of my contents page, I tried to pastiche the look of Q magazine. On their contents page they have lines to separate each featured article along with a red box in which is a page number. I learned to use InDesign's line tool, which allowed me to draw basic lines on the page to separate each of my featured articles, and use the paint bucket tool to fill the boxes in red, along with the text tool to type the page numbers. I could use the text toolbar at the top of the page to change the font size and colour to make the text stand out to the reader and be easy to read. This gave a more generic feel to the contents page. By the end of my AS project, my overall skills with Adobe Photoshop hadn't developed a significant amount from the start, as most of the production tasks consisted of using the InDesign software rather than Photoshop to construct the magazine pages. I didn't use Photoshop much throughout the first year. My skills were still rather basic, as I could add new layers and insert my text and images onto the page, which is what I did when creating a draft of my cover page before making the final design on InDesign, and move content around the page when I was reorganising. It was important that I created a draft on Photoshop first, so I had a solid idea of what I wanted the page to look like before constructing the final design with no idea what I wanted the design to be. In addition, I could then receive feedback from my teacher on the draft design, so I could make the necessary changes on InDesign when creating the final design, which would ultimately impact positively on the overall product. I didn't use Photoshop much to manipulate my photography. I didn't feel I had the skills necessary to achieve good quality images by using the tools on Photoshop, which I think impacted negatively on the overall quality of my AS product. My skills using the blogging site Weebly had improved from the beginning of the course, as I could upload documents as well as inserting documents, text, images and links which allowed me to create an average looking blog, showcasing my AS work. However, due to the numerous problems I occurred with the site on a regular basis throughout the first year, I decided to switch to WordPress for my A2 project and develop my skills there. My skills using the DSLR camera for photography had improved by the end of the year, which I think was due to how much time I spent throughout my first year of A-levels using them. Not only for media studies coursework, but for film studies coursework also. I could take numerous images with the ability to use manual focus and play around with the settings to adjust the brightness, and also flash mode, which gave images a more professional look as it exposed the models in more detail. During the planning process for my A2 product, which was the creation of a regional listings magazine, we had to create a mood board of ideas for colours, photography and designs for the main product. During this task, I came across some photography which consisted of what is called colour splash. This involved the image being mostly black and white with only one colour highlighted. As my house style was to be red and white, I was interested to have my photography for my magazine consist of this colour splash effect, which would be a theme for my product. This meant I had to develop my skills using Adobe Photoshop to pull off this effect when manipulating my images during the production process. I watched some Photoshop tutorials on YouTube which explained how to highlight only one colour of an image. From these videos I learned to open a Photoshop document with my image as the background and then duplicate it, which would allow me to turn the hue/saturation to 0, which made the image black and white. I then learned to use the eraser tool effectively to erase parts of the duplicated image, which was a layer above the original one, which then revealed the colour of the original image to make the overall image appear to have this colour splash effect. I only erased the red parts of the image, and I did this to my photography of models and locations, which I then inserted onto my cover page, contents page and lead mill advertisement page in InDesign. This allowed my magazine to appear more artistic and represent the city in an artistic way. My skills with InDesign hadn't really developed from the first year, as I could only do the basic functions. When I began the A2 course, I didn't have any experience using the blogging site WordPress. However, I learned quickly how to write blog posts by inserting text, images and documents and publishing them to my blog. I could change the text font and size by using the toolbar at the top of the page, which was very easy to use. Furthermore, I learned how to reorganize blog posts by changing the dates they were published, which ensured I kept all my tasks in the correct order. So my blog looked organised, which is what I didn't manage to do in the first year. I gradually found WordPress easy to use, which is why after every lesson I would update my blog with the progress I achieved during that lesson, which shows evidence of development throughout the course. When having to present some of my tasks with videos, I use the website Prezi, which is a presentation site. I did this for my treatment and ancillary task and created a presentation in which I learned how to add numerous slides, images, text and clip art, as well as insert numerous animations to some of my images and text. I had no previous experience using the website, but I found it simple to use. I found it easy to insert my audio into the slides and had no problems with the audio quality. The only problems with it is that it would sometimes be quite slow. For example, you have to use a mouse to hold and drag the page to move across from a presentation. This would sometimes be quite slow and would occasionally freeze, which was rather frustrating and slowed the production process down. In addition, I couldn't export the Prezi presentations as videos, as I had to subscribe to Prezi Pro. To do this meant I had to embed a link to the website into my blog, so people would be able to see the presentation. One of the ancillary tasks involved creating my own website for my magazine, which I'd never previously done before. To do this, I used the website Wix, which is a website creator. I found Wix very difficult to use at first, as the site would often be very slow and it would be difficult to extend the length of the page. Inserting text and images would often be quite fiddly and require patience, as the process would be slow. However, the templates were good bases to build upon when designing each page, and I feel I was successful in creating a professional looking website for my magazine, with links which would take the user to different pages quickly and with no problems. Overall, I feel my skills using certain media technologies have improved massively throughout this 2-year course, and has resulted in me creating a product at A2 which is of a much better quality from the first year.